This is a quote from Jose Rizal's El Filibusterismo. And it's insane how he was able to write this literary piece at the age of 30. He was also known for many things. He was a doctor, a fencer, a polyglot, and well, some say a ladies' man. But if there's one thing he's most known for, it's his writing. From poems to anecdotes to essays to novels. One might say that he was a man of many words. However, out of all his works, his most known ones are his novels Noli Tangere and El Filibusterismo. These were published during the Spanish Inquisition in the Philippines in the 1800s. It is also believed that El Filibusterismo ignited the revolution. But how did El Fili become so famous and controversial? Well, let's turn the dial back a bit. On February 17, 1872, secular priests Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora were executed at Bagumbayan. They were tagged as the masterminds behind the mutiny of arsenal workers in Cavite with the aim of overthrowing the Spanish government. Their deaths infuriated the Ilustrados, and Rizal decided to dedicate his second novel to these martyr priests. His dedication reads, "To the memory of the priests Don Mariano Gomez, Don Jose Burgos, and Don Jacinto Zamora, executed in Bagumbayan Field on the 17th of February, 1872. I have the right to dedicate my work to you as victims of the evil which I undertake to combat." Rizal started writing El Filibusterismo in October 1887 in Calamba. The novel was written against the background of threats and oppressions he and his family suffered because of the backlash of the publication of Noli Tangere and the Calamba agrarian trouble. Rizal had finally completed the novel by March 29, 1891 in Biarritz, France. El Filibusterismo is the sequel to Rizal's Noli Tangere. It's a follow-up response to the continuous tyrannical Spanish rule and the execution of the martyr priests. In both novels, the corruption of those in power, especially the friars, is repeatedly shown and represented. In Noli Tangere, the story is dominated by Juan Crisostomo Ibarra and his ideals for a better future for the Philippines by empowering the Filipinos through education. In this book, Rizal wanted the people to aspire for change and liberation. However, in El Filibusterismo, the book offers a different solution to the tyranny of the friars. We are introduced to Simon, a man who believes that aspiring for change and relying on education is not enough. Simon then has big plans to overthrow the existing system through a violent upheaval, an explosion to start the revolution. In this book, Rizal emphasized on the need for the people to open their eyes to reality and rebel against the Spanish government for its oppression and abuse.
Alam ko na, si Simon ay Ibarra. Búsquenle a Simon.
If you dig deeper into each character, you'll see that every single person in Fili is an emblem of the Philippines then. From the friars to the ilustrados like Rizal and to the common Filipinos, El Filibusterismo's characters represent each of the social class. This representation tells so much about the classist and elitist oppression that was happening back then. The friars are the long-standing enemy of freedom, the colonizers who hide their political agenda under the guise of religious proliferation. Simon is one of the few influential Indios who use their power, money, and connection for the greater good, and in this context, freedom. Basilio constitutes the Filipinos who have had enough of being submissive to an unjust system and decides to join the militant struggle of the Filipinos. Meanwhile, Cabezang Talas's story is one of the lead causes of the revolution. He is one of the peasants who were continuously exploited by the friars. Isagani, on the other hand, is the antithesis of Simon. He is the optimistic idealist whose love for his country is pragmatic and hopeful. Doña Victorina's character remains relevant until today. She is the Filipino who has a twisted view of reality as she embodies colonial mentality. For the Doña, anything native is inferior while anything foreign is superior. Similarly, Señor Pasta's loyalty lies on the rich and the powerful. And of course, the beautiful women of Fili, the ever-pure Maria Clara and the rich lass Polita Gomez. Just like Simon and Isagani, these two are their complete opposites. While Polita enjoys the wealthy background of her family and rejects Isagani for his progressive ideals, Maria Clara is the unhinged lady of Fili, who symbolizes the purity of naive women of their time. While she isn't as fully clothed with wealth as her counterpart, she holds great importance to her values and promise bestowed upon by her sweetheart.
Chapter 1 starts with the jeweler Simon, the kind Padre Florentino, the official counselor Don Custodio, the journalist Ben Zaib, the haughty Doña Victorina, her niece Polita Gomez, and other people among the elite on the upper deck of the Vapor Tabo, a steamboat that is slowly sailing across the Pasig River from Manila to Laguna. Here, the steamboat is compared to the Philippine government at that time, moving ever so slowly, full of hot air, tyrannical, and pretentious. In contrast, those who were at the lower deck are those at the bottom of the social ladder, the Indios or Filipinos. This shows the class divide at that time. The elite resided comfortably on the upper deck that was bright and full of fresh air, while the poor had to tolerate staying at the lower deck that was steaming hot and far from comfortable. In Chapter 2, we meet a grown-up Basilio and his poet friend Isagani, who also happens to be Polita's lover, conversing with Captain Basilio at the lower deck of the Vapor Tabo regarding their plans to establish a Spanish academy. Captain Basilio tells them that their proposal will never pull through because of the Spanish friars. But Isagani, along with several other students and some Filipino and Spanish professors, are determined to establish the said academy. Later, Simon comes down from the upper deck and strikes a conversation with the two friends, but insults the province from where they come from, saying that they are too poor to buy jewelry, and Isagani takes great offense in this. Simon returns to the upper deck, and Isagani tells Basilio that he does not like the jeweler. Upon Simon's return to the upper deck in Chapter 3, he is told by the passengers that he had missed many beautiful sights while he was away. Simon tells them that places don't hold any meaning to him unless they have legends. This prompts the passengers to share several legends of the lake, such as that of Malapad na Bato, Doña Jeronima, and San Nicolas. Now, the thing is that these legends were most likely ancestral beliefs that are now considered mere stories ever since modern religions were imposed onto the country. Ben Zaib then asks about the tale of a certain Ibarra who was shot dead in Laguna Lake. Simon turns pale upon hearing the story. Padre Florentino notices this, but Simon convinces him that it's just seasickness. Chapter 4 tells us about another important character in the story, Cabezang Tales, who happens to be the son of Tatang Celo and the father of Basilio's lover, Juli. He used to be the head of a barangay and owned a prosperous farmland where he grew sugarcane, but the friars wanted to grab it. They then taxed Tales and kept raising the tax until he could no longer pay it back. Instead of giving in and handing the land over, he continued to fight for his ownership. He built a fence around the land and guarded it with a rifle he owned. When rifles were then banned, he wielded a bolo, and when bolos were banned, he wielded an axe. Unfortunately, Tales was kidnapped for ransom by bandits and could not fight back with only his axe. His daughter, desperate to get him back, sold all her jewelry and agreed to work as a maid to her manang Penchang in order to raise funds. However, there was one piece of jewelry that Juli could not bear to give away, a locket given to her by Basilio that was once owned by a woman named Maria Clara. In chapters 5, 6, and 7, Basilio arrives at San Diego through a cochero, but there had been a delay in their trip. This was because the cochero left his cedula and the Guardia Civil decided to beat him up first. It was Christmas Eve too, and Basilio witnessed a parade when he arrived. Basilio then makes his way to his mother's grave in the forest and stumbles upon the jeweler Simon, who was digging up a plot near where his mother was buried. He later discovers that Simon is an older Crisostomo Ibarra in disguise. At first, Simon threatened to shoot Basilio, but upon realizing that they were both the victims of injustice, Simon tried to recruit him into his revolution against the Spaniards. He tells Basilio that he had worked hard to save money and return to the Philippines to end the government's tyrannical rule. Basilio declines the offer, saying that he wants to finish his studies first and that revenge will never bring back his mother or brother. In chapters 8 and 9, Christmas had arrived and it was time for Juli to start working for Hermana Penchang as a maid. That morning, she did not greet her grandfather Celo a Merry Christmas out of respect for his sorrow on that day. Their family's unfortunate situation had become the talk of the town. Upon arriving at her employer's home, Juli was pinned as a sinner by Hermana Penchang because she does not know how to pray. Hermana then decided to teach Juli how to pray and kept her constantly at work so that she would not be able to return to her grandfather, whom Hermana blames for her sins. While Cabezang Talis was being held captive, however, the friars took advantage of this and handed over his land to the person who had intended to grab it. Talis was freed but was devastated to return to the land he had worked hard on in the hands of someone else, his father mute, and his daughter working as a maid. In chapter 10, Simon visits Cabezang Talis' home to sell his jewelry there. He shows off his revolver to Talis, and soon enough the buyers arrive. Talis feels insulted by his wealth because he knew that he would be able to get his daughter back in exchange for a single diamond from the chest. Simon then asks Cabezang Talis if he has any jewelry to sell, and Sinang, a friend of Juli, points out the locket that she left behind. Simon recognizes this locket as Maria Clara's and offers to buy it for 500 pesos. However, Cabezang Talis says that he would have to consult with his daughter first. He leaves to find Juli, but then comes across the two men who have taken away his land. They were mocking him, and Talis was enraged. Later that evening, Simon had found out that his revolver was stolen by Cabezang Talis, and in exchange was the locket. Simon was pleased by what he had done because he knew that this meant that Talis would be joining his revolution very soon. We are then introduced to the Captain General in chapter 11, who always made sure that people are reminded of his authority by having a marching band follow him wherever he goes. He was trying to hunt for deers in Boso Boso, but failed because the said marching band had startled the animals. He returns to Los Baños from his unsuccessful hunt and meets with the friars to play cards with them. The friars, however, have become experts in pretending to be bad at cards so that the Captain General would always win. This part of the chapter critiques the authorities at that time who were arrogant and egotistical about their position and power. The Captain General later learns of the students wishing to establish a Spanish academy, and he asks his advisors for their opinions on it. They are yet to reach a decision due to many disagreements. We meet Placido Penitente, a student from the University of Santo Tomas, in chapter 12. He is a clever student, yet he despises the way he is being treated and wants to stop schooling, but his mother tells him to remain patient. While walking back into the campus, teary-eyed and frustrated, he is met by his goofy classmate Juanito Pelaez, who is the son of a rich mestizo merchant, Don Timoteo Pelaez. They converse, starting from what they did during the Christmas break, to what lessons Juanito missed, to Juanito asking Placido to teach class and have a Dio Pichido with him, and finally to Juanito collecting funds from Placido. Later, a student asks Placido to sign a petition regarding the establishment of the Spanish Academy, but he held back his signage, not wanting to be late for class. Chapter 13 talks about the education system at that time, where memorization was the norm over analysis and experience, and students were constantly humiliated by their educators. It was physics class under Padre Melon, and he had been calling on students to answer his questions in the class. He finds joy in seeing his students struggle and fail to give him an answer he wanted to hear. After calling on a sleepy student and Juanito, he called on Placido and asked him questions regarding mirrors, to which he explained with, "If the book says so, Padre." Padre Melon is unimpressed and tries to embarrass him by pointing out that he had been absent 15 times. But Placido is certain he had only been absent at least 5 times. This pushes Placido to a limit and he angrily walks out of class. Placido, in this chapter, represents what Filipinos could be, quiet and submissive, but are able to reach a breaking point and react angrily. In chapter 14, we are introduced to the students who are in favor of the Spanish Academy: the poet Isagani, the trickster Juanito, the rich and nationalistic Macaraig, the pessimistic Pecson, and the Spanish ally Sandoval. The group starts scheming how to get Don Custodio to approve the request, but Isagani tells them that he would rather ask Senor Pasta, a lawyer he is acquainted with, for help. Isagani meets with him in chapter 15 and tells him of their plans and asks him to convince Don Custodio to approve the request, but unfortunately, Senor Pasta advises Isagani not to pull through with their proposal because it might anger the Spanish friars. This is no surprise since the lawyer himself works for the friars. We meet the Chinese businessman Quiroga in chapter 16, who holds a dinner for an array of esteemed guests: friars, government employees, soldiers, and merchants. Among his guests was once again the jeweler Simon, to whom Quiroga borrowed 3 diamond bracelets from. He planned to present those bracelets to a charming lady who was friends with a powerful man so that Quiroga could use him and his influence to clear a deal worth 6,000 pesos. He asked the lady to pick any of the 3 bracelets, but she ended up liking all 3 of them and took them all, leaving Quiroga with the greater debt to Simon. Simon tells him not to worry and that he is allowed to pay a smaller sum and to direct any money borrowers to come to him. The condition doesn't end there though. He asks Quiroga to store rifles in his warehouse, to which the Chinese man hesitantly agrees to do. 12 guests leave Quiroga's home to watch Mr. Leeds' show at the Quiapo Fair. Padre Camora's perverted tendencies are exposed in chapter 17, where he ogles at Polita Gomez, who is being escorted by her aunt Doña Victorina and her lover Isagani. This chapter critiques the hypocrisy of friars who are thought to embody goodness and holiness. In chapter 18, Mr. Leeds puts on a magic show where a floating head named Imuthis, now called the Sphinx, tells its life story to the audience, which is awfully similar to the story of Crisostomo Ibarra. The Sphinx targets Padre Salvi among the audience and calls him a murderer, hypocrite, and a liar. Padre Salvi fearfully cries out mercy and faints. We return to Placido's situation in chapter 19, where he is tired, frustrated, and angry. He arrived at the home he was boarding in and was greeted by his mother, Cabezang Andang, who had visited from Batangas. Once again, she tells her son to be humble and have patience, but Placido is certain that he has had enough. He leaves the house and roams around the area until he comes across Simon. He accompanies the jeweler that night and learns of his plans to revolt. And later that night, Simon hallucinates a disappointed Don Rafael and Elias. In chapter 20, Don Custodio reviews his decisions regarding the establishment of the Spanish Academy. He consults Senor Pasta, who only gives him confusing and contradicting ideas, and even Pepay the dancer, who has no idea what's going on. The decision is difficult for him. He doesn't want to upset the friars, but at the same time, he wants to give the students a chance to learn. However, he is not as welcoming as he seems. He still believes that Indios or Filipinos should remain docile and submissive, and that praising them too much would cause them to rebel. Eventually, Don Custodio found an envelope containing information for the School of Arts and Trades, and through that envelope, he was able to reach a decision.
Simon once again appears before Basilio, who was looking after a sick and dying Capitan Tiago, and tries to recruit him into his revolution anew. He also tells him that he plans to free Maria Clara from the convent, but Basilio breaks the news to Simon that Maria Clara had long died. Simon breaks down and runs away hysterically, not wanting to accept the truth. With this anguish comes a rush of a more furious desire to revolt. Simon was certain a revolution was coming. Back to the students, they later gathered in a pansiterio to celebrate the Academy's approval. While there, they exchanged declamations expressing dissent against the Spanish friars, but this unfortunately reached the authorities. The next day, several posters were put up containing expressions against the Spanish government and the call for an uprising. The authorities tagged the students for this and arrested them, including Basilio, who was unlucky enough to be caught by the guards. In The Friar and the Filipino, Isagani, who was questioned about his involvement in the banquet, argued with Padre Fernandez on the education they are teaching the students. While he claims that the system was branding students who go for freedom and education as filibusteros, Padre Fernandez denies and says that not all friars deprive people of education. It is just that education must be bestowed upon the deserving. Basilio's arrest reaches his lover Juli, who tries to find a way to bail him. She asks Padre Camorra for help, but after she is threatened by his advances, she jumps off the church window in desperation and falls to her death. This is the final straw for Basilio, and he ends up agreeing to join Simon in his revolution. Simon then partnered with Don Timoteo Pelaez, who plans to wed his son Juanito Pelaez and Polita Gomez, Isagani's former lover. The partnership is part of Simon's plan to gather the rich and the elite in one place and set off a bomb that he had placed inside a lamp. The explosion would act as a signal for the rest of the members to strike. However, this plan was foiled by Isagani, who was told of the bomb inside of the lamp. Not wanting his former lover to be endangered, he snuck into the reception of the wedding, snatched the lamp, and jumped out of the window and into the river. The bomb was never set off, and the members of the revolution were captured. As the members of the revolt were captured, Simon decided to run and hide to where Padre Florentino lived. A chapter away from the final curtain call, an ambush occurred while the prisoners were being escorted by the Guardia Civil. Carolino, a soldier and the son of Cabezang Tales, went on to fight the bandits and killed their leader, an old man who turned out to be his grandfather, Tata Celo. Padre Florentino took care of the man for a while, but Simon decided to drink poison to finally end his life. As he was dying, he told the priest of his story, how he had come from Europe to the Philippines, how he had dearly loved Maria Clara, and how he had waited 13 years before finally coming back to seek revenge under a new face and a new name. Simon passed shortly after he had finished telling his tale, and Padre Florentino took his chest of jewelry and threw it into the ocean, exclaiming that if it were ever needed again for good, then the ocean may spot it out. But if it were ever needed for evil, then forever shall it stay at the bottom of the sea. So, you see, El Filibusterismo is a tale full of juxtapositions. While it is a story of hope in the act of taking back freedom in a violent manner, Rizal eventually ended the novel with a pinch of realism, that true freedom isn't attained through mere violence, but education, constant work, and suffering. Rizal emphasizes that violence is not the best solution out there. While change is necessary, an aggressive pursuit of progress is nothing without radical change. And its key difference from its preceding novel is that in this sequel, all of that good, peaceful hope for an independent Philippines met with the same old colonial power who shuts down any criticism it can sense, turned into a hungry, vicious desire for freedom.